Hello. This is talk show Window to the Future, Logos Global. I'm the head and host of this channel. Today, we meet people from high tech. We look back, we analyze today, and we're trying to look in the future. In 4 years, here we'll have 5G standard here. So it will be if we successfully deploy 5G environment here in Russia. And it actually depends on how successfully Russia will work with 3GPP, the consortium that standardizes mobile telecommunications. What are the prospects of 5G in Russia and in the world? We'll ask these questions to 3GPP Mobile, Adrian Scrase. Hello.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to this interview.
Could you tell us, please, why did you come to Russia this year?
For several reasons. First of all, I haven't been to Russia for 5 years, so I thought it was about time I did come to Russia.
Did you miss it?
Second, of course, I understand that Russia... I have missed Russia, yes. Second, of course, I understand from the press that Russia has ambitious 5G plans. Even the president himself has made statements about early plans for deployment of 5G. And yet, from where I sit in the standardization process for 5G, I see very little Russian presence. So my main reason for being here is to understand how Russia has ambitious plans to be a leader in 5G and yet is absent from the standardization arena.
As far as I know, in 3GPP there are more than 600 different companies who are members, and about 150 of them Chinese, and about 80 from the US, and only one from Russia. So my question to you is, in your view, will Russian company be able to use standards that are developed in 3GPP with such a small presence of Russian company in the consortium?
First of all, regarding the numbers, I think you need to interpret those numbers carefully. The numbers you mentioned concerning China, for example, are not necessarily Chinese companies. They are companies that participate through the Chinese Standards Association, the standards body. So there are Western companies like Ericsson or Nokia, for example, that are included within that number. So you cannot conclude that there are more than 100 Chinese companies in the project. There are more than 100 companies who participate through that Chinese route. Moreover, companies like China Mobile may have 5 or 6 different memberships representing the subsidiaries they have, who each have individual membership within the project. Can Russia make a difference? Absolutely. I mean, the standards are free for everybody to use. Anybody can take them. They are freely available on the internet, so everyone's entitled to take those standards. But to be able to understand them and interpret them correctly, you really need to have participated in the making of those standards. So my contention is that Russia should really be present, actively contributing not only to the content of the standards, but in obtaining a thorough understanding about how those standards can be deployed.
Let's try to understand. 3GPP is a global initiative. What is the purpose of it, in simple words?
The purpose of 3GPP is to prepare a complete system description of a 5G telecommunications system. That's the purpose. The purpose is not to define how those standards shall be deployed. Deployment is left to the imagination of the operator. But you must have a sufficient level of standardization that enables interoperability between systems and also generates sufficient commonality so that you have a mass market environment. Looking to the future, everybody wants to pay less for their telecommunications, but they want to get more. That's only achievable if you have a mass market. To generate that mass market, you must have a common understanding among the industry players that build products to that market. That's how you will generate the economy of scale.
So in other words, so that a certain market could be fully represented in this, that market should provide for the consortium its vendors, operators, developers of different hardware, but not only phones, but also other network devices. So then it explains why so many companies, foreign companies, are represented on the list. At the same time, for our audience, I would like to learn more, in more plain words, to learn what is the new quality, the new capabilities of 5G besides the speed.
I mean, 5G is inherently different to 2G, 3G or 4G. If we look at 2G, that was very much a voice system. It was determined to enable people to communicate by voice. If you look at 3G, that was the sort of the first start of a little bit of multimedia, some media type messaging. When we look to 4G, that was really about mobile access to the internet in a big scale, and making sure that that access to the internet by consumers was a compelling experience. If you look to 5G, it's really not about consumers and devices. It's more about the digitization of our entire industry. We can look at connected tractors, connected cars. It might be automated manufacturing processes. It could be ports and harbors. It could be aeroplanes. It's an entire digitization of our lives, in fact, going far, far, far beyond the 2G, 3G, 4G story, which was all about connecting people. This is all about connecting things in a 5G environment.
In other words, you're saying that it can be Internet of Things, including industrial Internet of Things, household Internet of Things, and many others.
Yes, it's the Internet of Things in its grandest scale. It's the connection of all devices and all forms of transport together with consumers like you and I. So it's that entire ecosystem of end players who will benefit from this connectivity system. If we take the good example of factory automation, there is a drive amongst manufacturing industry to be able to automate the connectivity between their manufacturing processes. A factory may one day be producing one product. In 3 months' time, it might produce a different product, which means reconfiguring the factory floor. When you do that, if your factory instruments are all connected by wires, it takes a lot of time and money to reconfigure the factory floor. If that connectivity was by wireless, then you can reconfigure the factory floor much more quickly, much more economically. But you want to do that so that all manufacturing companies can deploy the same technology, thus generating the economy of scale. If you have a proprietary system which is perfect for producing cars, that in itself is not a scale compared to if you add cars to tractors, for example, or producing bicycles. You want to have the same communication system for all manufacturing process, thus creating this economy of scale.
Now you're talking about the advantages that the manufacturers will get, that the spreading of 5G devices will give, distribution of such devices will give consumers more benefits, both corporate users who are connected to this cars, machines, engineering devices, and other consumers of like regular common people.
Yes, common people will also have a distinct advantage from 5G. Many of them have grown up during the process of 2G, 3G, 4G. They expect their devices over time to stream seamless video. No longer do people just want to watch very poor YouTube videos. They want to watch high definition or ultra high definition video. They expect to do that anywhere they are at any time, but at low cost. That's only achievable by having a very efficient telecommunications system. This is what 5G strives to achieve for the end consumer.
So it turns out that 3GPP covers many areas of knowledge. This is telecommunication, science, technology, engineering, manufacturing. It's a huge knowledge. How 3GPP manages this knowledge, if you can actually control that?
I'm not sure control is the right word, but
Probably manage.
Or manage, yes. What is changing over time? If we looked 5 years ago, the population in 3GPP was really telecommunications vendors, telecommunication operators. In recent years, we're seeing a large number of new entrants, which are the people who manufacture factory environments, Bosch, Schneider, Siemens, these sort of companies. We also see the automotive industry arriving, Audi, BMW, Volvo arriving. We see the aeronautical industry, we see the agricultural industry. So over time, our population is changing considerably. What is difficult is to then synthesize all of these differing requirements and translate them into technical parameters. Because we cannot design a system that is uniquely designed for agriculture and uniquely designed for cars and uniquely designed for automotive. We have to have a generic system which can be characterized to suit all of those different industrial needs. This means that the project has to behave in a slightly different way. We have a very well structured set of committees which understand how to translate end user requirements into technical parameters. We then have a very rigorous process for dealing with many, many hundreds of technical contributions and deciding how to handle those contributions and how to agree on the technical impact they may have. This is not easy, of course, nor is it a small task with the many contributions we receive. But we have demonstrated over time that we are quite capable of dealing with that.
This committee is dealing with their own industry? Each committee is kind of dedicated to a certain industry?
No, it's not divided by industry. It's divided by technical design parameters. So we have one committee that deals with the radio access network, another committee that deals with core network and terminals, a third committee that deals with service aspects and how to charge for services. So we break it down by telecommunications technical parameters. But for each parameter we look at, we have to take into account the needs of the differing industry sectors that will be the end beneficiary. Those industry sectors are present in the room, and if they determine that the direction we are taking will not meet their needs, then they will speak loudly and remind us that what they need would not be catered for in this situation unless we make a change to our standards.
So talking about territorial differentiation, do you have it? Do you differentiate it by territory, by country, by ethnicity maybe?
Yes, of course, we have national differences and regional differences. For example, some territories of the world have very large land masses with very low population. Other countries of the world have a small land mass with a very high population. And the design criteria for the network has to take into account both of those scenarios. If I look at Australia, for example, designing a network to cover rural Australia is very different than designing a network to cover, say, France or Germany. So the design has to take that into account.
There are certain realities that have to do with security. For example, China is considered a threat, and they are also part of 3GPP. Russia, where we are now, is under sanctions. So these factors, do they impact 3GPP work?
Let me answer this in two parts.
Okay.
First of all, security is a very important issue. We know that our telecommunication systems and our infrastructures are under constant threat from malicious attacks, people who have the motive to try and collapse our systems and collapse our infrastructure. So whatever future system we design must be inherently secure. That means that we have to look not only at the security needs of today, but the likely threats for the next 5 to 10 years. when 3GPP started the 5G standardization program, the first piece of work they conducted was a security study. Even before we decided how the radio or the core network would operate, we entertained a security study so that we could fully understand what are the future threats likely to be. Then as we designed the new system, at every juncture we question ourselves, is this inherently secure? Is it sufficiently secure to resist the attacks of the future? And that's exactly how we've approached the 5G design. It is inherently more secure than 4G. It does take into account the future threat of quantum computers, for example. So there are many, many instances where the security of the design has been enhanced in a 5G context. Then to come to your second part of the question, 3GPP takes no position on colour, on creed or on country. So we are entirely agnostic to the political world around us. And I think we have to be. We design our systems based on the best technological solutions that are available today, irrespective of their origin. We have rules that cover intellectual property rights. So we make sure that whatever is contained within our standard, that technology remains available to everyone who wants to deploy it. But we do not entertain any debate at all about deployment scenarios or political influence. That's entirely out of scope for our project.
Yes, that's a great approach. And I would like to go back to the beginning when I said that Russia is not so well represented in consortium. So what do you think? How can Russian companies, without really participating in 3GPP, how they can work with this standardization? In which way we should work towards it in order to get to 5G in 4 years?
I mean, my recommendation is that Russia really considers participation in the standardization work. There is no impediment for you to take full part in the writing of these standards and ensure that the Russian intellect is encaptured within the standards and the Russian needs are encapsulated within those standards. You could participate at governmental level. You could have the Russian state taking part in that work. You could have direct participation from your operators and vendor community. You could have participation from representative associations that represent a collective of operators or vendors. So participation is open to you in many different levels, but I would really recommend direct participation, because it's only through that direct participation that you will truly understand what's actually happening in a 5G context. If you want to know what's already been decided, that's easy. You can go to the internet and you can find that. If you want to know what's going to happen in the next 6 to 9 months, you can't find that on the internet. You will find that in the standardization committee rooms. You will find that in the tea breaks and in the bar in the evenings and all the discussions that happen in the periphery of our standards meetings. But to get that full understanding, you really have to be physically present at these meetings.
High technology market, one of the ways of achieving victory in competition, there were proprietary standards and competitive game with incompatible systems, and you have a great experience in propagating open standards. Could you share with us, in this high technology world that is fighting with competitors with the proprietary standards, and you prefer open standards, how does that work? Could you share this with us?
I think that's a very good question, because if you look historically, let's not go back too far, let's go back to 3G. Where in the 3G environment, there were probably 5 technology solutions available. And as a country, you could determine, and as an operator, you could determine 1 of 5 solutions. When we got to 4G, that really came down to 2 solutions. When we get to 5G, it's really come down to 1 solution. What we saw historically is where you had those different technology choices, it kept the prices high, it fragmented the market, and it was the end consumer at large that actually paid the cost for that. If you are heading towards a single technology solution, where the entire industry, telecom industry, has focused on providing solutions for that one set of standards, you will have the inherent gain of an unfragmented market, a concentrated market, you will see prices fall to the sort of levels that consumers demand. So there is an inherent benefit of having a standardized solution. That doesn't mean to say that every solution looks the same. This comes back to my earlier answer that, we're not standardizing how you implement a system. We're standardizing to a sufficient level that enables interoperability between systems, but it leaves enough left for the operator to distinguish himself one from the other. So there are many ways you can implement standards. There will still be compliant implementations, but they may look very different. Otherwise, you offer no choice to your end market. But we've seen in the past what happens when you have technology choices. Invariably, one succeeds and one fails. It's unusual to have more than one solution that survives in the longer term, because the market decides ultimately which is the favoured solution. So my contention, yes, a standardised single platform which unites all of industry is the way to go.
So what do you think? What part of the standards should be more closely studied, especially startups that come to the market with quick solutions, and they're trying to sustain in the market by bringing those small solutions, especially in Internet of Things, and I think such startups will come. What is part of the standard would be more beneficial for them to study?
I mean, 5G is such an all-embracing ecosystem. There are many, many opportunities for innovation. We see a lot of startups in all parts of the system where maybe they focus on one very, very small component, which is essential for delivering one piece of the jigsaw puzzle. But in that small component, if you can innovate and provide a very effective solution, then as a small company, you do stand a good chance of making your way into this large forest of solution providers. So I think there's an opportunity at every level for startups and small companies to make their way into this ecosystem.
Despite the fact that you don't have these units by industry, but do you have some industries where more advanced, more prospect in this development, in what will allow them to move forward more quickly?
I mean, I think if you want to know who will be the end beneficiary of the system, a good place to start is to look to see which of those industries have actually started to participate within the standardization project. As I said, 5 years ago, we were mainly telecommunications type companies. If you look at the companies that now come to 3GPP, they include vehicle manufacturers, tractor manufacturers, shipbuilders, airplane builders. So you can see that there is this diverse set of end users coming into the project to make sure that their requirements are captured. The very reason they are coming is because they want to deploy this system. So we know where the future market lies, or at least we have a good indication as to where the future lies, by looking to see which of those industry sectors have actually started to participate in writing the standards. They wouldn't do that if they didn't intend to use this standard. So if you're looking for opportunities for small companies, actually I think where there will be a great opportunity is for integrators, because if you look at the telecommunications industry and you look at, say, the agricultural industry, they both speak a completely different language, and maybe at the worst case they use the same word to mean two different things. So that I think there will be a market for integrators, companies who specialize in bringing together the telecommunications industry with, for example, agriculture, or with automotive, or with factory automation. So I think that's where we will see a lot of opportunities for small companies, those who really have skill sets in the two sectors and have a specialism in bringing those two sectors into one.
In order for this to work industrially, so there should be solutions based on machine learning and deep learning using AI. Do you have a certain vision how this future will look with this industrial Internet of Things, with hooked up machines and with AI?
Certainly artificial intelligence has a big role to play in 5G and 5G deployment. If you look at the complexity of operating a network which is trying to serve all of these different industrial sectors. It will be beyond human capability to actually manage these networks in an effective way. So we will have to automate the management of telecommunications networks. Artificial intelligence gives us a very useful tool that will be able to learn by experience, so that when it sees, for example, a fault condition in a network, it will know by experience the solution to that fault, and it will already rectify the fault without human intervention. So we see many examples where artificial intelligence will have a great role to play. Of course, artificial intelligence won't replace all of the humans that are running mobile networks, not at all. But they can make a very, very good contribution to some of the roles that lend themselves to automation.
Do you share this vision that both labor and line management and maybe even the management of the whole company, at some point they'll become mixed? Not only human, but also artificial intelligence as well.
I think that's inevitable, yes. I mean, we will have this situation of humans and machines working in harmony. Of course, this is a little bit futuristic. I don't think it will happen tomorrow, but at least in our lifetimes, we are going to see this happen, yes.
Do you think it's safe for humanity?
Actually, that's a very good question. We have started in my ETSI role, we're already looking at the security issues of artificial intelligence. For sure, it opens up some very big security questions, and they need to be addressed. So it's not a technology you can implement lightly. You have to look at the implications of AI and make sure that you don't expose your network then to malicious attacks.
Now I speak about not only those cases that all those futuristic and science fiction writers use in their books, but I'm talking about the situation when development of the technology will not be understandable by humans because it will be controlled by AI, development of certain product lines and even whole manufacturing facilities.
I don't think in the shorter term, because the machines are only as clever as we make them. So the machine starts with zero intelligence. It's only by us programming those machines how to learn that they are able to learn. So I don't see in the shorter term machines being cleverer than humans. They may be much quicker, they may be much more efficient, but I don't think they will be more intelligent than the human being. They will just be better enabled to do multiple functions at the same point in time, so much more efficient than a human being. But they're not going to replace the human being.
Analysts say, in order to be efficient in the future market and to be competitive, enterprises will have to be very transparent for the outside world, to be able to compete not on the level of the factories, but on the level of ecosystem that is around these factories.
And it could be any extreme, any sort of circumstance between those extremes. I really don't see that the manufacturing industry will want to open up its data to the outside world. It will want to ensure that it has the same integrity of its manufacturing data as it has today. And this is where we will need some innovation from the service providers. How can you provide these services from a public mobile network operator to a factory, but at the same time enable that factory to control all of the processes that it wants to control? For example, subscription management, which today might be done in a public mobile network operator environment. In a factory, maybe the factory itself wants to take care of its own subscription management. So we will see the whole sort of deployment scenario changing completely to what we have today. And it could be from fully public to fully private and every stage in between.
So that we, in the foreseen future, that we will see a full-scale 5G implementation and will use all its great opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed.